The first sign that my marriage was over didn't come from a lipstick stain, a late night text, or a secret encrypted folder. It came from our thermostat. It was a Tuesday in early November. A cold snap had hit Chicago, and I was sitting at my desk in the logistics firm where I work as an IT administrator, shivering because the office HVAC was broken. Out of habit, I opened the Ecobee app on my phone to check the temperature at home, just to make sure the pipes weren't freezing. The house was set to 72 degrees. I stared at the screen. My wife, Elena, is a marketing manager, but for the last year, her life had revolved around a singular dream: opening a boutique cafe. We'd been living frugally, saving up $40,000 in a joint account for a lease and renovations. She was supposed to be in the West Loop all day, looking at commercial real estate with her broker, David. I was supposed to be at the office. Our thermostat is set to drop to 62 degrees during work hours to save on gas. It only overrides to 72 if someone manually changes it on the wall unit, or if the motion sensors in the living room detect persistent activity for more than 30 minutes. Someone was home. I didn't immediately jump to infidelity. I assumed Elna's meetings had wrapped up early, or maybe she had a migraine and came home to sleep. I sent her a quick text. "Hey, how are the site visits going?" 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Exhausting. "Just finished up at Fulton Market. David thinks we can negotiate the lease down. Grabbing a coffee now, then heading to the office for a bit. Miss you." I looked at the text. I looked back at the Ecobee app. The motion sensor in the living room was still registering activity. A cold, heavy knot formed just beneath my ribs. I opened the app for our Simply Safe alarm system. I didn't have cameras inside the house. I've always felt that was an invasion of privacy, but we had door sensors. Front door, opened at 1:15 p.m. Front door, closed at 1:16 p.m. It was currently 3:30 p.m. The door hadn't opened since. I wanted to be wrong. We had been married for 5 years, together for 7. She had held my hand in the hospital waiting room when my father died. She was the woman I was planning to build a family with. I told myself she was just lying about being at work because she felt guilty for taking the afternoon off. When she came home that evening at 6 p.m., she smelled like vanilla and winter air. She smiled, kissed my cheek, and dropped her keys on the counter. "How was the West Loop?" I asked, my voice casual, as I poured 2 glasses of water. "Draining," she sighed, slipping off her boots. We walked through 4 properties. The landlord for the spot on Morgan Street wants a massive deposit. I was on my feet all afternoon. She looked at me, her eyes wide and earnest. It was a look of pure, unadulterated sincerity. That was my first mistake. I couldn't handle the suspense, so I confronted her, right there, with zero hard evidence. "That's weird," I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Because the thermostat sensors showed someone was in the house from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Elena froze, just for a microsecond. Then a look of profound annoyance washed over her face. She didn't stutter. She didn't cry. She rolled her eyes. "Are you tracking me, Andrew?" she asked, her voice hardening. "No, I was just checking the temperature because you don't trust me," she interrupted. She crossed her arms. "I came home at 1 o'clock because I got a terrible migraine and threw up in the bathroom at the Starbucks on Morgan. I didn't tell you because you've been so stressed about the budget lately, and every time I take time off, you give me that look about how the cafe is a financial risk. I just wanted to sleep it off without a lecture." I stood there, feeling like an absolute idiot. Her explanation made perfect sense. I had been stressed. I had been nagging her about the budget. "I'm sorry," I said, rubbing my temples. The text you sent said you were at Fulton Market." "I lied so you wouldn't worry. God, Andrew, this is exhausting." She walked past me, radiating disappointment. For the next 3 weeks, I felt a deep, gnawing guilt. I bought her flowers. I tried to be more supportive of the cafe. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and my subconscious refused to let it die. I started noticing small things. She began keeping her phone face down. Not always, but often enough. She changed her passcode. When I asked her to look something up on her phone while my hands were full with groceries, she snatched it away, opened the browser herself, and held the screen at an angle. I didn't try to hack her phone, I didn't install spyware, I just waited. The real break in the case didn't come from a brilliant IT maneuver. It came from an automated email from Credit Karma. I was at my desk eating a sandwich when my phone buzzed. New inquiry on your Equifax credit report. I logged in. There was a hard pull from a commercial leasing agency in Chicago. I frowned. Elena and I had agreed that the cafe lease would be strictly in the name of her newly formed LLC to protect our personal assets. We had specifically discussed this with a CPA. I found the phone number for the leasing agency on Google and called them. I put on my best customer service voice. Hi, this is Andrew. I'm calling to verify the status of a lease application submitted recently for a property in the West Loop. Yes, Andrew, the agent on the phone said cheerfully. I have your file right here. Congratulations, the landlord accepted your personal guarantee. The 5-year lease is fully executed. Your wife picked up the keys on Monday. The room started spinning. I gripped the edge of my desk. Can you email me a copy of the executed lease for my records? I managed to choke out. Sure thing, sending it to the email on file now. 10 minutes later, the PDF arrived. I opened it. It was a standard commercial lease for a property on Morgan Street. Rent was $6,500 a month. Total liability over 5 years, $390,000. And on the last page, there was my signature. I hadn't signed anything. I stared at the digital ink, my brain scrambling to make sense of it. Then I remembered. 3 weeks ago, a few days before the thermostat incident, Elena had sent me a DocuSign link to my personal email while I was in the middle of a massive server migration at work. She called me, sounding frantic. Andrew, my CPA needs you to digitally sign this tax waiver for the LLC formation. It's just a standard spouse acknowledgement form, but he needs it in the next 10 minutes or we delay the filing by a month. I hadn't read it. I trusted my wife. I clicked the link, applied my saved digital signature, and went back to my servers. She had buried the signature page of a $390,000 commercial lease behind a fake cover sheet. She hadn't just cheated on me, she had strapped a financial anchor to my neck. I left work early. I felt physically sick. I drove to a park near our house and sat in my car for 2 hours, watching the gray clouds roll over the lake. I needed to understand why. Why would the woman who loved me do this? I realized I needed to look at her iPad. We shared it for watching Netflix in bed, and her iCloud was still logged into it. That night, while she was taking a bath, I took the iPad into the basement. I didn't look at her messages. She was too smart for that. They were all deleted. I opened the Files app. People always forget the Files app. There was a folder labeled Morgan Street Cafe. I opened it. Inside were the LLC formation documents. I scrolled through them. The LLC wasn't owned solely by Elena. It was a 50-50 partnership. The other managing member was David. But there was another document, a drafted but unsigned business loan application. I read the summary. They were applying for a $150,000 small business loan to renovate the property. And under the collateral section, Elena had listed our primary residence, the house I bought before we were married, but which she had marital equity in. The picture finally crystallized, and it was far worse than I had imagined. David wasn't scamming Elena. They were partners. David was a charismatic, risk-taking broker who made Elena feel alive, unlike her cautious, frugal, IT guy husband. They were having an affair, yes, but more importantly, they were building a life together using my money. She had forged my signature on the lease, so I would be legally responsible for the debt if the cafe failed. Meanwhile, she was preparing to transfer our $40,000 in savings into their joint LLC to fund the build-out. Once the cafe was running, she was going to blindside me with divorce papers, take her half of the equity in our house, and leave me holding the bag for a $390,000 commercial lease I never agreed to. I sat in the basement, the blue light of the screen illuminating my face in the dark. I remembered how she looked at me across the kitchen island that morning, smiling and telling me she loved me. I had spent years protecting her, working overtime, saving money, sacrificing my own hobbies so she could pursue her dream. I realized, with a quiet, shattering clarity, that I was protecting someone who had stopped protecting me a long time ago. I didn't scream. I didn't smash anything. I just felt an overwhelming, crushing exhaustion. I carefully put the iPad back on her nightstand exactly where I found it. The next evening, she cooked my favorite meal, steak and garlic mashed potatoes. We sat at the dining table. The ambient lighting was warm. She laughed at a joke I made about my boss, a genuine, beautiful laugh that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "You know," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "Once the cafe opens and stabilizes, I want us to take a real vacation. Maybe Italy. You've been working so hard for us." I looked at her hand resting on mine. I felt a phantom pain in my chest, mourning the ghost of a marriage that was already dead. "That sounds perfect," I said. I took the next day off work and went to see a lawyer. I laid everything out: the forged lease, the LLC documents, the joint bank accounts. "This is fraud," my lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Sarah, said flatly. "We can go to the police. We can invalidate the lease." "If we go to the police, she gets arrested," I said. "Yes, she committed a felony." I shook my head. "If I press charges, this becomes a massive criminal trial. I'll be dragged through court for years. It will cost me tens of thousands in legal fees. My employer will find out. It will consume my entire life." "Andrew, if you don't invalidate that lease, you are on the hook for nearly 400 grand. "What if we break the lease now?" I asked. "Before they even start renovations, what's the penalty?" Sarah calculated quickly. "Standard commercial break clause usually requires forfeiting the deposit, plus 3 to 6 months rent as a penalty. You're looking at maybe $25,000 to $30,000 to buy your way out legally." "Do it," I said. "Andrew, you shouldn't have to pay for her crime." "I'm not paying for her crime," I replied softly. "I'm buying my freedom." I formulated my plan. It wasn't a movie-perfect revenge where I destroy my enemies and walk away unscathed. Real life doesn't work like that. Real life requires blood. I was going to have to bleed to get out of this, but I was going to make sure she bled more. Step 1. I went to the bank. I withdrew exactly half of our $40,000 joint savings. My legal half. I left her $20,000 untouched. I opened a new account at a different bank and deposited my money. Step 2. My lawyer contacted the commercial landlord. We invoked the early termination clause on the lease. The landlord was furious, but a check for $26,000, paid entirely from an equity line of credit I quietly took out against my house, smoothed things over. The lease was terminated. The locks on the Morgan Street property were changed. Step 3. I started packing. I didn't wait for a dramatic confrontation. I didn't want to hear her cry or lie or try to manipulate me. On a Friday, while she was at work, likely at a hotel with David, I packed my clothes, my electronics, and my irreplaceable sentimental items into my car. I left a manila envelope on the kitchen counter. Inside the envelope were 3 things: the divorce petition, citing irreconcilable differences, a copy of the LLC operating agreement showing her and David as partners, the lease termination agreement showing that the Morgan Street property was gone. I also left a letter. It didn't contain insults or rage, it was just facts. "Elena, I know about David. I know about the LLC. I know you forged my signature to leverage my credit for your business, and I know you were planning to leave me with the debt. I have legally terminated the lease. You no longer have a cafe location. I have taken my half of our savings. Your half is in the joint account. I will be selling this house. My lawyer has instructed me to inform you that because I had to use marital equity to pay the $26,000 penalty to break the lease you fraudulently signed, that amount will be deducted entirely from your share of the home sale during the divorce settlement. Do not contact me. All communication goes through Sarah." I drove away from the house I thought I would raise children in. I checked into a long-term stay hotel near my office. My phone started blowing up 3 hours later. First texts, then calls. I blocked her number, then came the emails. They were frantic, unhinged. She swung wildly from begging for forgiveness, claiming David had manipulated her, to furious accusations that I had ruined her dream and had no right to cancel the lease. I didn't reply to a single one. The fallout was ugly, and it wasn't perfectly clean. Because I had to break a commercial lease, a negative mark hit my credit report. My pristine 780 score dropped to a 640. Because of the divorce, we had to sell the house in a soft market. After paying off the mortgage, the realtor fees, and the $26,000 lease penalty out of Elena's equity, I walked away with far less cash than I had put into the home over the years. I had to rent a small, one-bedroom apartment in a much less desirable neighborhood. I lost money, I lost my home, I lost my credit score. But Elena lost everything else. The $20,000 she had left in the joint account evaporated in weeks. David, it turned out, was an opportunist. The moment he realized the lease was terminated and Elena no longer had access to my credit or my savings, his love vanished. He abandoned the LLC and stopped answering her calls. Without a location, without David, and without my financial backing, her cafe dream collapsed instantly. During the divorce mediation, she tried to fight for a larger share of the remaining assets. My lawyer simply slid a copy of the forged DocuSign EP logs across the table and quietly reminded her attorney that the statute of limitations for wire fraud and identity theft had not expired, and I was still well within my rights to file a police report. Elena signed the settlement the next day. It's been 8 months now. I heard through a mutual friend that Elena is currently living in a cramped studio apartment in the suburbs. She is drowning in credit card debt from her legal fees. She is still working her marketing job, but the spark is gone. The illusion she had of herself as a brilliant risk-taking entrepreneur was shattered the moment she had to face the real world without my safety net. As for me, my apartment is small, and the radiator hisses at night. My credit is slowly recovering. I am rebuilding my savings from scratch. I'd be lying if I said there aren't nights where the grief still catches me off guard. Sometimes I walk past a coffee shop and feel a phantom ache in my chest. You don't just erase 7 years of your life without leaving a scar. But yesterday, I came home from work, unlocked the door to my small apartment, and tossed my keys on the counter. The apartment was quiet. There were no lies hidden in the walls. There were no financial time bombs waiting to detonate. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and looked out the window at the city. I didn't destroy my ex-wife. I didn't play God. I just stepped out of the way and let the consequences of her own actions hit her at full speed. I lost a lot in the process, but as I stood there in the quiet of my own home, breathing in the still air, I realized something. For the first time in years, I felt entirely, profoundly safe.